Hi, this is Phil Shapiro. I came across this really interesting book, Uniquely Normal, Tapping the Reservoir of Normalcy to Treat Autism, by Robert J. Bernstein with Robin Cantor Cook, forward by Dr. Temple Grandin. Here are some testimonials from the book. Support people with autism on their terms. Uniquely Normal will provide readers with lots of practical ways to work with the full spectrum of individuals with autism. Dr. Temple Grandin, author of Unwritten Rules of Social Relationships. Without exception, Rob Bernstein's work with these patients has markedly improved their ability to function effectively with others. I stand behind Rob Bernstein's techniques without reservation, and that is Professor Ram Kairam, MD at Columbia University Medical Center. So here's the story of this book. Growing up, Robert J. Bernstein always knew his older brother was unique. Life with a brother on the autism spectrum taught him a lot, how to recognize moods, emotions, and behaviors in someone who didn't think like him, and how to make a connection. This family dynamic also sparked in him the drive to pursue his degree in psychology. Having worked with patients on the spectrum for over 30 years, Bernstein has produced a cognition-based approach to work with people with autism on their terms and allow them to lead. This approach follows three basic elements: recognizing that each person with ASD contains a reservoir of normalcy that he or she can tap into. 2, believing that each person with ASD is different from every other person with ASD and working to see the world from his or her point of view. 3, creating and seizing opportunities that enable each ASD person's typical behaviors to emerge and develop. So I found this book to be deeply, deeply compassionate, and it opened up my mind, and what an incredible human being the author has to devote his entire life to helping people, to helping autistic individuals and their families. So here's from the foreword. The 27 case histories in this book cover the full range of the autism spectrum. They vary from a smart, perfectionist student to a nonverbal child with constant stimming. Parents, teachers, and individuals on the spectrum can all find one or two case histories that they relate to. There's no complicated jargon in the book. The prose is conversational and easy to understand. Rob Bernstein tells the story of how he successfully works with each individual. The ages range from a child of 2 years to older adults. Something I really like about this book is that busy parents and teachers can look through the cases and read only the ones that are similar to either their own child or a student at their school. And then this is from the author. My approach is founded on my belief that all people with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, have reservoirs of normalcy within themselves. I also believe that the key to helping them develop more typical behaviors is to understand how to circumvent each ASD person's unique constellation of limitations and tap into those reservoirs. My approach can be duplicated by others, parents, family members, teachers, caretakers, because it calls upon not academic training, but fundamental capacities we all have and can develop, if need be. The ability to watch closely and observe, to listen carefully and interpret, to explore logic different from our own, to refrain from correcting in favor of guiding, and to expand our perceptions of reality to include those that do not come naturally to us. A cognitive approach. People with an autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, have traditionally been treated with the behavioral approach I learned in graduate school, which rewards them for acting more like the rest of us and less like themselves. We're so eager for them to fit in, to get by, to be normal, that we set about training them to act that way. On the surface, they may seem less weird, more regular, and we are reassured. Maybe now our son will start acting more like our other kids, we tell ourselves. Maybe our daughter will be more like the other girls. But underneath, they are who they always were, as confounded by us as we are by them. My approach is different because it's based on cognition, thinking, rather than behavior. My goal is not for people with ASD to act more like the rest of us, although that often happens eventually. My goal is for them to be able to live in the world and connect with the people in it as themselves, to express their unique humanity and engage more fully in the human interactions that give life meaning and make it worth the effort of getting out of bed every day. And I help them to do this not by insisting. Okay, it goes on and on. The stories in these pages recount my experience working with children and adults ranging in age from 2 to 62. My cognitive-based approach is founded on the premise that when we change the way we think, we change the way we behave and live, which is why it is effective for people of any stage at any stage of their life. Just as I've been able to engage with and help my clients, so can you connect with your loved ones and improve his or her quality of life. To get the most out of this book, I urge you to explore the cases in every age group. The techniques I use with a 6-year-old differ from those I use with a college student, but their goal is the same: to learn how the person's mind works and retrain his or her thinking to function more productively. My hope is that you see something of your loved ones in the stories that follow and use the exercises, strategies, and techniques I describe to bring you closer to him or her. Here are the table of contents. Check this out. This is really interesting. So this is part 1 and part 2 and part 3, I guess. Part 1, early childhood, ages 2 to 5. Janie, Luke, Ivan. So it explains different. Part 2, childhood, ages 6 to 10. Jeff, Addison, Hank, Jeremy. So, and then part 3, early adolescence, ages 11 to 14. So you can see this book is a labor of love. I mean, this book is kind of like the whole life work distillation. And for the price of the book, you get the author's entire life experiences offered to you for your own wisdom and benefit and for those you care about. And then part 4, adolescence, ages 15 to 18. This is an incredible book. This is an incredible book. Part 5, young adulthood and beyond, ages 19 and up. So even going up to age 62, a retired scientist. And then here I grabbed just some short passages from the book I wanted to share, just so you can understand the depth of thinking that the author has, the depth of his compassion, the effectiveness of his compassion, and why it's counterintuitive, so that if we read and listen to what he has to say, we can rise to his level of wisdom and not just follow a path that seems like it's a good idea, but we actually have to get to the good idea, not just seem to get to the good idea. So here's a passage. It didn't work every time, but Nate did eventually start returning to his seat more often than not. He realized there were options beyond those to which he'd been confining himself. His behavior improved, which was always the goal, but it improved because he changed the way he was thinking, not because he was punished for bad behavior or rewarded for good. He improved from the inside out. Another passage here. Patrick had uttered a recognizable sound, the beginning of a word, and imbued it with meaning. Still, I resisted the urge to praise him. Instead, I smiled warmly and continued with the activity. I did not praise Patrick because to do so might encourage him to imitate my words rather than attach meaning to the formation of his own. This is an occupational hazard. If you commend nonverbal children for forming words, you send the message that what counts is making sounds rather than making specific sounds words that hold meaning. Many children with autism parrot a parent or teacher's language. They see the pleasure in the elder's eyes when they speak, so they imitate what they hear without attaching meaning to it. The goal, however, is not to have nonverbal children imitate our speech, but to develop their own speech, deploy it to connect with others, and make themselves understood. This is powerful, powerful thinking. I haven't read a book this powerful in a long time. I read the other book I read that was totally excellent, Neurotries by Steve Silberman. I read that book 2-3 years ago. I highly commend that book. But this book is so powerful and so interesting. If you're interested in my book reviews, you can see the other ones, sites.google.com/site, Phil Shapiro Book Reviews. I commend this book highly. This is a highly commended book, Uniquely Normal. You should find a copy at your public library. If your library doesn't own a copy, they must buy a copy so that this book can be accessible to all who need it. It needs to be also in the reading and recommended to any social workers, therapists you know. Please help pass the word around. This is a really totally outstanding book. For you, those of you curious how I made these book reviews, I use free software called Simple Screen Recorder. I record to my Olympus digital audio recorder. I have this webcam software called GUVC View. Here's my contact information. And if you'd like to support these book reviews, you can make a small contribution on my Patreon. Patreon.com/Phil Shapiro. This is what it looks like, that website. So, Patreon is an interesting website where you can support people who are creating value for you in your life, and you can support them in a small way, almost like a tip jar. You know, there's a tip jar, or if there's a street musician you'd like to support, you give them $1. Well, that's the same kind of idea here on Patreon. You can give a small amount, and then the goal of the person creating value is to have 50 or 100 or 300 people each give them a small amount each month. And if that happens, then that helps encourage them to create more content. Isn't that an interesting concept? This is Phil Shapiro. Until next time,